the Northwest home for paranormal, you're listening to U.S. Phenomenon with your host, Mario Magana.
From the Pacific Northwest in the shadow of the 1962 World's Fair, the Space Signal. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever the case may be for you. This is U.S. Phenomenon. I am your host, Mario Magana. Tonight, or if you're not listening to the show on one of our radio affiliates, KOSW, KAPY, or our flagship station, KVI, you're checking out the podcast. And this podcast is going to have you thinking on levels that you probably haven't thought about in a long time. And we're gonna dive into some interesting things. We're gonna talk about God, and we're gonna talk about UFOs. Our guest tonight is no stranger. Tonight, our guest has spent 4 decades writing, directing, and producing award-winning films. But his latest project takes him somewhere new, straight into the UFO debate. Derek Warfell is an author of the book called UFO and God. It is my pleasure to welcome to U.S. Phenomenon, Derek. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us this evening.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, these two things don't typically go together, right? God and UFO. I mean, most people are I think everyone believes that UFO is kind of in its own kind of spectrum, and your religion and everything else is kind of in its own little thing. What got you down this path?
Well, I'll be honest about my bias up front. I'm a Christian. I worked on campus ministries, and then I went to Hollywood and was a film writer and producer for many years, or at least struggling for many years, and still struggling at times. I really didn't spend too much time dealing with thinking about UFOs. I kind of, like everybody else, thought, no, who knows what it is? I don't care. And somewhere around the early 90s, I began to see more and more credible stories coming out from credible people who had seen these flying objects that are hard to explain. And then people who had encounters with people on these objects. And I didn't have a place for that in my worldview, and I said, I better investigate this. And the more I investigated, it became very obvious. I picked up a book, I believe it was John Ankerberg. It said The Truth About UFOs, and it just became, of course, it's obvious. This is what obviously is happening here. And I guess, I needed to put it in a broader context. That all throughout history, every culture, every religion has believed we share this universe with supernatural beings. The most common thing people know about is ghosts and poltergeists. But sure, you can go back to the ancient Near Eastern gods, the ancient Egyptian gods, the Arabic jinn, the demons during Jesus' day, the Greek and Roman gods. Now, obviously, these supernatural beings, when they first initiated these various things, they were mythologized by the countries to forms probably that weren't even recognizable. And first, I don't believe that Thor is up on Mount Olympus throwing lightning bolts. Okay, in fact, I was in Greece about a couple of years ago, and I went to Mount Olympus, and I asked the people, "Have you ever seen any gods up there?" And they said no. So I don't believe that, but I do believe that we have been sharing this universe with supernatural beings for as long as people have been on this earth. And I think every culture and religion has said that. So I think there's a connection there between the supernatural and God, if you will. And it's only let me just mention one last thing and I'll cut. It's only in the 20th century when science became very proud about itself. Science basically was just a technology for testing hypotheses. But somewhere in the 20th century, it went beyond that. It became a religion. It became basically, they said, the only thing that exists is the material, physical world. Anything beyond that, spirits, spirituality, supernatural, it's all just myths. And I mean, it's like, unlike science to eliminate data before you even start, but that's what they did. And now, we have this situation where they're in a difficult situation because they have to admit that there's something out there that's not something they understand.
It's interesting to me because when you start to look at, we'll just take a snapshot in time. Mount. We'll go back to Kenneth Arnold and the sightings of UFOs
Mhm.
back near Mount Rainier,
Yes.
the incident, and see, I like to tie this back to the Pacific Northwest only because I think we get robbed in regards to Roswell becoming the capital of UFO. But, but
Yes,
I always say
absolutely.
this. I always say this that the Pacific Northwest is home to the most paranormal activity in regards to the first UFO sightings, the
Kenneth
first
Arnold.
the first sightings of the Men in Black were here at the Murray Island incident that happened just around the same time as the Kenneth Arnold sightings at Mount Rainier. Now, what's interesting to me, we'll fast forward into the Tic Tac videos that now the videos that are starting to show up, and the people that are the military individuals that have had the access, or they're like, what is this that we're seeing? um and everyone talking about Area 51. This stuff is real. We're talking about, this covers in your book as well in one of your chapters. This stuff is real, right? This is not just we're starting to see more hard evidence right now.
Well, I think that the thing is, it's like uh, just because something isn't physical doesn't mean it isn't real. I mean, I think anybody who's heard about haunted houses and followed
Sure.
some of the TV shows realize there's real things happening. One of the people we have in the interview, a guy, an apologist, Greg Kokel, said, just because it's physical doesn't mean it isn't real. It's not physical, but it's just as real. Love. Well, let me give you another example. Love. Well, do you have a physical object for love? Not really, but it's real. There's a theory out there in philosophy called the nothing buttery theory, and this gets back to the whole thing about uh, physical. The world's only physical. We don't deal with anything else. For example, if you go to chalkboard
Yeah.
and you start writing a really complicated equation on the board, somebody walks in the room and said, "What do you see?" Well, he says, "I see chalk and slate." Well, don't you see anything else? No, there's nothing but chalk and slate there. And you say, no, there's a very complicated formula there. There's
Right.
intelligence there, and I think the thing is, it's like literally just because we don't see certain things doesn't mean they aren't real. We see the physical effects of those things, but we don't always see them exactly. So yeah, I think there's this prejudice in science and even in universities today. I mean, that they ignore the greater picture, or like when a person dies. I mean, what was it, the film a couple of years ago, 27 grams? Supposedly when a person dies, they lose 27 grams of weight, right? I mean, is that what the soul is there something else? I mean, if you've read anything about near death experiences, those are very real. I mean, in terms of the memories that people have, the fact that literally after they supposedly flatline, they can walk through the hospital. They can tell you things that are going on in other rooms when their body is still in this other room, and it's entirely accurate. Well, how do you explain that? There's some really good books about that. I don't fully understand that phenomenon, but I do believe that literally, when you say, what's the connection between UFOs and God? I believe, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, is that before God created the human race, he created another species. And for lack of a better word, I'm going to call that species angels. The Bible also calls them stars or watchers or sons of God. But the point is, and this species he created is very, very intelligent, much smarter than us, very, very powerful, much more powerful than us. In the Bible, it calls humans sheep. Well, sheep are the dumbest animals on the farm,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But he never calls angels sheep. They're very intelligent. Anything we can do, they can do better. Anything we know, they know more about. And so the idea is that if we can create spacecraft Well, so can they, and they can create stuff that's much better. If we can create robots, look what we can do with robots today. And go ahead, sorry.
I was going to ask you, in that correlation within the Bible, talking about humans being sheep and the stars being the aliens. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, well,
How does that? I mean, someone who, yeah, I'm a fellow Christian. Someone who's maybe not that. I mean, I would say I probably tread lightly. I probably more surface level. Probably shouldn't say that, but I'm a believer.
yeah,
I
sure.
have some faith, but like this is new to me, and I'm sure there's got to be others who are listening right now. Like, wait, what? But and this is why I'm so excited to have you on to break this down for us. Like, how does that trend? Like, how am I not known this? Like, I feel like you're giving me the cheat code. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the thing is this. Most people, I think what we're talking about is the angelic realm.
Sure.
God created these beings, and after a certain point in eternity past, 1/3 of them, the Bible says this very clearly, rebelled against their creator and have been at war with God and with holy angels and with us ever since. And so that's what you see. The thing that got me started on this was in seminary. I heard about a book by Donald Gray Barnhouse called The Invisible War. And as soon as I heard that, I said, everything just kind of fell into place. I saw what our place was, what we were doing, why God was doing what he was doing, why people were doing what they were doing. Literally, there's this war, and these beings have been fighting against us. Jesus uses the term to kill, steal, and destroy. That is their
Sure.
goal. And probably the primary goal is to prove God doesn't have the right to rule. They rebelled against him. They thought they could overthrow their creator, and they have been strategizing how to do that ever since. I could spend an hour just going through that. I won't go into
Sure.
details, but the point is, you look at all these other supernatural entities throughout all of history and what they have done. They have enslaved people. The Bible says in another verse that certain verses just kind of pull the shades apart.
Mhm.
One of them is Ephesians 6:12. It says, if you can remember this, it's a big jump. We don't struggle against flesh and blood. Well, that's crazy. I mean, aren't we struggling against the other political parties? Aren't we struggling against
Sure.
Iran? Aren't we struggling against
Yes.
the guy who robbed our house? Aren't we struggling against? No, ultimately, yes, we are in a way, but they're just intermediaries. There's forces behind them that are using those people to destroy and to hurt us. You see this most best in the book of Job, where Job basically, his children are attacked by a neighboring tribe because these fallen angels motivated people to come. His children are killed by a roof collapsing on them, not just by chance, but because these powerful beings caused a wind to come or a fire to blow or whatever. And the point is, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, world forces of darkness, spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. Well, those are 4 levels of executives in this fallen angelic realm, or what the Bible calls the domain of darkness. And at the top level, there are literally people who are certainly angels, so evil spirits that control leaders. Like, for instance, I firmly believe that Hitler was absolutely controlled by evil spirits. And there's other leaders in the world, more or less. There's the example of this is in the book of Daniel. It talks about the Prince of Persia. And it's not talking about a human being. It's talking about an angelic majesty that has control over that area that was Persia at the time. And that angelic being was so powerful that he was able to delay the message of an angel of God coming to talk to Daniel for 21 days. So there's different levels. I think what we call demons are probably the lowest levels. They're the foot soldiers. It's like, and most people think, oh, these beings are just stupid things, writhing people on the ground, spitting up pea soup. They're
Mhm.
far more intelligent than that. Most people have a picture of demons or fallen angels as fat little men in red tight bodysuits with a
Sure.
pitchfork and horns. And
Right.
this comes from medieval art. That just no, that's not what they look like. The Bible talks about angels can look exactly like us if they want to. For example,
Okay.
the
Real
the
quick, I want to
angels.
A
I'm
reset
sorry.
for everybody here. Our guest tonight, someone really, really intriguing this evening. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. Our guest author, Derek Warfell, the author of the book UFO and the God, companion to his documentary. So you also did a documentary with this as well. But UFO and God, revealing the deception and truth behind the supernatural, the invisible war. Now, if you haven't read the book, get a copy. Get a copy for you, your friends. I need to read it. I want to watch. I want to see this. I want to read it. Uh, um, what what's interesting to me when we talk about the fallen angels and UFOs and what everything has been going on. I don't want to get too further down the line, but in the 60s and what people have seen, because I'm like trying to like piecemeal a little bit of everything of what we've all been seeing throughout the decades over the last x amount of years, over 50 plus years, 60 plus years, 70 plus years of these sightings. What's interesting to me, and I know that we'll talk about this a little bit further, and I because this is the type of show we do, I'm going to ask you: are we close to end times? Um, that's something that when we're having this conversation, it kind of feels like right now that we're in a very tumultuous time with these wars that are going on. The things, the economy, the earth moving, these quakes. There seems to be a lot of shifting going on in present times that of course, when you're young and little, yeah, your life is carefree, right? But you kind of remember these things, the Berlin Wall falling, you're like, all right, this was awesome. But things had changed, but things have continued to evolve. But are we getting closer, as you're talking about, with this invisible war? Are these guys pushing us to the brink of extinction?
I mean, you raise a very interesting question. I tread very lightly about trying to predict whether we're in the end times or not.
Sure.
I believe we absolutely could be, and I can give you a good reason for that. But on the other hand, the Jesus himself says it's not for you to know the times and the epochs. There's been so many religious people who've been wrong, and they said it's going to be today or it's going to be tomorrow.
Sure.
Literally, this goes back to Augustine. When the Goths sacked Rome, they thought this was the end of civilization. Well, of course, it wasn't. There's a book by Chandler from the LA Times, religion many years ago. It's a great book called Doomsday. I didn't know this, but in 1000 AD, there were people gathered where St. Peter's Square was being built that literally expected that Christ was coming back at 1000 AD. Of course, it didn't happen, and then there were like, I think, 1 million people out of 25 million in this country in the 1940s who followed a godly farmer who said that Jesus was coming back in the 1940, was it one or two, because of some 2300-day prophecy and Daniel. And of course, nothing happened. And a lot of people lost their faith. So I tread very gently on that.
Sure.
But I do believe that there's something that happened in the last, century that is completely different than anything else that's happened before. And that is Israel becoming a nation with their own land again. For over 2,000 years, this isn't people. I mean, most people groups don't last 2,000 years to start with. But this is a people group that retained their national identity and then got their own land back in 1948. I mean,
Yeah.
people used to joke about saying the Bible's not true. Look, they says they're going to be back in living in Israel. It's a joke. The Bible's never, prophecy is not true. And then, against all odds, they became a people living in a land again. And it's like literally, I remember there's a story about Napoleon, who, basically was arguing with the Archbishop of France. And he said, you religious people, show me a miracle. Show me a miracle. And without saying a word, the Archbishop just turned and pointed to one of his top generals who is Jewish. Why aren't the Jewish people wiped out? And the point is, Napoleon couldn't say anything. So I think we see this thing in 1948, something that hasn't happened for 2,000 years, that the Bible indicates has to happen. It has to happen because it's on the prophecy of the dry bones, that Israel will be regathered as a secular nation, and then will become animated with religious life, that the temple will be rebuilt. Well, that's impossible right now, because the Dome of the Rock, the second holiest place in Islam, is on where the temple needs to be rebuilt. And so, that hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of things that haven't happened yet. So, I don't know. I mean, I do believe that we're going to see, another fact is this whole thing with UFOs.
Yeah.
There is a prophecy in the book of Second Thessalonians. I mean, the question is, if these fallen angels are so powerful, why don't they just rule the world right now? I mean, if they're that strong, if they're that, I think, and the Bible in Second Thessalonians says there's something restraining evil in the world today. As evil as the world is, it's going to get a lot worse, and there's something restraining. And at a certain point, when he who restrains is taken away, then the Antichrist will be revealed. Well, that hasn't happened. Yeah.
So since they rebelled, would they make them the fallen angels? Because would they be?
Yes.
And
Yes.
would they then be the demons at that point? The aliens would they be the demons?
Yes. I mean, basically, as I said, I hesitate to use the demons because people have a very this
right.
Renaissance arts. Basically, I use the word domain of darkness.
Okay.
The fallen angel is the entire fallen angelic realm, and there's different types of positions and duties and powers within that realm. And appearances as well. In the book, I pointed out that you look through the book. I have some diagrams in the book of what people said they've seen. Let me see if I got some pictures here. That literally there's Nordics who look exactly like humans to a large extent. Then there's the Anunnaki, the men in black, as you've mentioned. John Keel. I mean, we never really think of men in black as being all CIA agents or something,
right?
But no. I mean, the point is, John Keel, when he went to West Virginia, talked about men in black encounters, and he didn't describe them as human beings. He said they're very clumsy in the way they walk. They have very thick black-soled shoes. They know things about people that they shouldn't know. It's almost like they have superior knowledge. Now, there are government agents who have been trying to cover up all this UFO stuff, don't get me wrong. But the real men in black, and that goes along with that, there's another group, I can't list all of them, but called Black-Eyed Children. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No,
but people will run across these basically 10, 12, maybe 14, I'd say 12-year-olds, and they're dressed in black. Their eyes are completely black. There's no cornea. And people who run into them will say it's like they're looking into the face of evil, and they just walk away. I mean, they kind of talk like John. There was one guy who was going across West Texas, because if you've been in West Texas, the midnight, there's nothing there. I mean, it's desolate. And he's driving a pickup truck. This is a pretty strong guy, and he basically, there's no bathroom, so he pulled off the side of the road to take a leak, and he comes back to his truck, and they're in the middle of nowhere, and there's this 12-year-old boy dressed in black with black eyes, and he says, "Invite me into your truck, and we'll go for a ride." And the guy's like freaking out, like, what? I mean, it gives you chills. And he feels bad because it's a kid. You can't leave a kid here. And he says, "What? I don't you have parents or something? Or do you live near here?" And he goes, "Invite me into your truck and we'll take a ride." And he said, "Kid, I don't think I can help you." He gets in the truck and drives off. And after driving a little way, he says, "I got to go back. The kid's stuck out there. I got to go back." He goes back. There's no one there. I mean, and there's other people who've run into these beings. There's supernatural beings that have occurred throughout all of history. They're all part of the angelic realm. I mean, look at the variety, even in the human realm. we've got giants, we've got midgets, we've got handicaps. Look at the huge, God creates with huge variety. Look at the huge variety in the animal realm. I went into an aquarium in, where was it? This was in California, it was in Long Beach. And they had some seahorses. I've always been interested in seahorses. And they said there's 40 variety of seahorses. I'm thinking, why do we need 40 types of seahorses? God delights in diversity, and so I think that you see the same thing. Why would you not expect to see a huge diversity in the angelic realm and in the fallen angelic realm? And if you look in Revelation 4 and 5, the throne room of heaven, you're going to see angels there that don't look anything like what you see in Renaissance art. I mean, so anyway, so I kind of got off the topic. I forget what you were asking.
No.
Huge variety.
It's interesting. Our guest tonight, author Derek Warfell, author of UFO and God. What's interesting when we were just talking about the different species and things like that, and I always have to bring it up because I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and I'm sure everywhere else, but I mean, if we're going down this realm, I know a lot of people have talked about. I think if I was to believe in Sasquatch, like there are people that believe that Sasquatch are cloaking. They're not from this universe. So there are individuals that think that Sasquatches are aliens. I've heard that they're not from here. I've also heard that some individuals have said that they are demons. In that realm, but when I am to the way I like to consume my my paranormal content, my Bigfoot to me or Sasquatch is indigenous to the planet. I feel that's how I interpret. If there's ghosts and things, I have not had that had those encounters. I haven't seen a Bigfoot. I've not had an alien or a UFO encounter, but I have had people come up to me after they find out that I host the show, have shared the same type of story. And these two individuals don't know each other, but the stories are so similar that they're driving somewhere and they see this UFO. I was like, this is the same story. Like the same story told to me, and these two individuals don't know each other. I find it so interesting to hear that two people that are probably worlds apart from each other sharing the same story about driving somewhere and having an encounter with an extraterrestrial UFO, if it's UAP, but the same story. Interesting to me. When we talk about aliens versus angels, I know this is one of your chapters. How would one individual who's just consuming, like, let's just say someone's tuning in right now or just turning on the radio and they're like, what in the heck are these guys talking about? Why would what would be the correlation with the angel? And I know you said this earlier on the first half of the show. You were talking about angels versus or aliens. Why did you decide to put a whole chapter about the two?
About angels and things. Yeah, I think.
Aliens, yeah.
Yeah, because I think basically, as I said, I think they all started out as holy angels.
Okay.
And 1/3 of them rebelled against God. And their goal from that point on was to overthrow God somehow or to prove he doesn't have the right to rule. And the way you do that is you divide and conquer. Let me just give you one example how you might try that. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came to earth. That's what as Christians believe.
Right.
Okay. He went to fast into the desert for 40 days and nights and was extremely weak. At that point, it says Satan or Lucifer, which is really his name, came to tempt Jesus. One of the temptations was, Jesus knew that men needed to be saved. He knew that he had to pay for their sins. He was going to have to go to the cross, something no one would want to do, but he realized he had to do it. And Satan came along. He says, look, you see all these kingdoms of the world, because the Bible calls Satan the ruler of this world. When man decided to follow Satan in the garden, he turned the rights to this world over to Satan. The Bible calls Satan the ruler of this world, the prince of the power of the air. And Satan says, I can give you these kingdoms of the world. You do not have to go to the cross. Just bow down and worship me. Okay, so there's the bargain. Now, Jesus does not dispute that Satan has rule over this world. He didn't dispute that. But he said, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. In other words, Satan was trying to separate God the Father from God the Son. He was trying to divide and conquer the Trinity. I mean, this has been going. This is why, I mean, it sounds horrible, but why did Hitler pick the Jewish people? I mean, you can give sociological reasons, but throughout all of history, the Jewish people have been persecuted perhaps more than any other during the Crusades, during the pogroms, during the World War II with Hitler, because God has made certain promises to the Jewish people. If those promises can be broken, God can be proved not to be God. And so literally, there are promises that will be fulfilled. They would probably say, well, God, choose someone else for a while. I mean, it's like we've suffered enough for you to keeping your promises. But I think the bottom line is that everything in the world starts to make sense when you see what the goal of these beings is. And so there is a connection between UFOs and God. UFOs, I mean, think about this. All throughout history, Satan's rule has been trying to get people not to follow God. Okay, how does UFOs play a part in that? Well, you have these UFO beings coming down, and basically they have people. Wouldn't be interesting to know if you had somebody who had all the knowledge of what's going on, that you would ask them, who are we? Why are we here? What's our purpose? Right? You have these beings who have technology, maybe 1,000 years advanced from us. Their spaceships can do things we can't even dream of. They can go between 40,000 and 200,000 miles an hour, over 10 to 20 times faster than ever fastest jets. Supposedly, if they've gone from other galaxies, they can do things we can't do. There's just so many things that they can do. Why are we still listening to this itinerant, dusty evangelist called Jesus that lived 2,000 years ago? And people ask them, well, you must know all the answers to the universe. And you know what they say they are? They say, first of all, there's not a personal God who created us. In other words, we're the ones who seated you here in the first place. We're your gods. Secondly, if there's no personal God, then there's no way to sin against him. And if there's no sin, there's no judgment day. If there's no judgment day, there's no need for a savior. If there's no need for a savior, Jesus is not the Son of God. Right. And the goal to life is basically reincarnation will help you elevate to finally to the highest level. And as I said, they say that they're the ones that seeded us here in the first place. And you even start to see that in films like Alien. I just was watching recently, what was it? Moonfall basically said that there's some intelligent race from another galaxy that seeded human life here in the first place. And that's what they say. So their goal is to get people not to follow God, to discredit Jesus, to discredit Christianity. And this is where, how do we know who they are?
Yes, Derek Warfell, our guest tonight, hanging out with us, being on the radio show and on the podcast. You're going to want to listen to the full podcast experience. If you're listening to us on the radio experience, you're getting a radio experience, a short and condensed version of the podcast. Listen to the entire podcast by going to our favorite podcasting platform or yours. All you have to do is search US Phenomenon with Mario Magana, or super simple, go to my website, onairmario.com, click on the podcast button, and you can subscribe that way as well. Our guest tonight, author of UFOs and God, Derek Warfell. Let me ask you this. When you were just talking about the deception here, it's interesting that you say this, and I've heard this a little bit on social media, not so much, but the discredit of Jesus Christ, and that what if the aliens were the ones that really did build the human race?
Yeah.
Put the book the Bible here to keep us from, becoming feral and, and destroying ourselves, but giving us this book to guide us from to create some type of rule around us, to give us some type of, you know, guidance in regards to, like, let's give them some structures so they don't just go, heave hoving through the rest of, becoming heathens, or these, just giving some type of guidance to kind of control the human race. And essentially that's what you were just saying just a few minutes ago, as you were talking about, and it made me think about this. I was like, wow, is this possible? As you're talking about the deception, because you're starting to see the discredit of people thinking that maybe the aliens are the ones that created the human race
Mm-hmm.
and put us on this planet, and said, and this could be totally, look at Area 51. We're going to give them a nugget. We're going to give them a fallen spaceship so they can reverse engineer it. Give us carbon fiber. Give us metals, precious metals that. And I always think this too, and we'll go back. And I always ask, I'm like, how do we go from automobile, horse carriages, all the way up to advanced, cell phones of today's technology, where you're like, you can have everything at your disposal right in your hand. It is so interesting to me to see the light year jump that we have taken from the 50s all the way up to 2026, and with everything that we've gone through. So that's where you can start to see where you can see other individuals who may not be believers in Christ may say, oh yeah, that's total possible. That's plausible that aliens were the ones that gave us this technology and we reversed engineered it. And so you're starting to, I have seen people say that, and not that I was like, yeah, it's possible. Anything's possible if you don't believe, you don't, like you said, love, you can't, it's not it's very interesting when you start to think about the tangibles. You're a believer in Christ. I'm a believer in Christ. It's not here in front of me. You know what I mean? Like, it's in a different realm. So I could see where that this could happen, where, if these guys are that smart, they're doing, I don't want to say they're doing God's work, but they're doing work to decide to put deception, to keep your eye off the prize. So, as we continue going through here on the radio show and on podcasts, what's interesting to me about all of this, on, the times that we do live in now, the pandemic, that we've had, I was like, wow, and at that point, that's when the show started. When I started doing the show, I was like, man, someone really doesn't want us on this planet anymore.
Well, there are people out there in politics who think that the limit of humans on the planet should be 500 million, and we need to cull them down. Maybe the best way to do it is a pandemic. I think that, essentially, as I said, these are very intelligent beings. We tend to we have these joke pictures of what demons or this fallen angelic realm are. Let me give you one example. I heard this before, and I had to check it up. And I think there's corporations that are covering it up because they don't want us to understand it. But the whole idea of the photocopier, okay, the carbon photocopier, the guy who invented it was a guy who played around with mediums and trying to, Chesterton, who tried to, contact beings, or I won't say seances, but kind of, contact spirits. And they, in the process, kind of guided him to create the photocopier. And it was so advanced. He took it in, he wrote the plans up, took it in to patent it. And the patent office wouldn't patent it, said, look, this isn't going to work. And he says, okay, tell you what, I'll go back, I'll diagram it better. So he took it back, diagrammed it better, went into greater detail, wrote it up, took it in. They still wouldn't do it. And finally, he went back, built the machine, took it into the patent office, and showed them it worked. In other words, it's so advanced, they couldn't imagine it. There's an Indian mathematician who didn't have much formal training, who came up with incredible, how can I say, mathematical discoveries. I'm going to forget his name. I don't think I can pronounce it, but basically, and he was lauded, and he said that he got his discoveries in a dream from a Hindu goddess. There's these beings throughout all of history that have been giving knowledge to mankind. Edward Casey, the sleeping prophet, he's a guy with an 8 grade education, a photographer, and he would go into a trance and he would diagnose illnesses and come up with cures that didn't even exist at the time. And so the concept is these beings have been feeding knowledge to the human race, but there's always a cost. There's always something they want back in return. The word con man, they're the best con men in the universe. Con doesn't stand for convict, it stands for confidence. They build confidence, our confidence in them, by giving us things. That's what a con man does. He gets you to trust him, and then basically he rips you off. Sure. And I think that you see that in the films that you see coming out. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, so a lot of this is just fiction, right? You try to come up with an idea that you think is interesting, and you make stuff up. So I'm not saying the films are accurately portraying what's actually happening, but you talk to people who, and that's the one thing about our film that is really different than a lot of others. We actually interview people who've had contact with these beings. And, that sounds crazy, but they have. And what have you learned? What was it like? What did they say? What did they do? I mean, wouldn't you be interested if you could have on your podcast an alien come on and you could start asking you questions? Well, the point is these people did that. And, and we tried to get that videotaped, what they were told. And if you want to read a really good book on that, for it's not a Christian, is a guy called Jim Sparks. It's called The Keepers. He said he was been abducted hundreds of times. And he says, what did they tell him? Travis Walton's another one. Whitley Strieber, although, there's things about that. He gained some financial benefits from that. So you don't know how much is true. Certainly Adamski, had benefit from that financial. So you don't know how much what he's saying is true. But the people we contacted are people generally who don't want to talk about it because they think people are going to laugh at them. They're going to be ostracized. So
it's interesting you say this because I had one individual who came on with his hypnotist. She hypnotized him and was able to get out that this individual had been abducted multiple times, and that he was a part of the gray species, is what he told us, and that they called the gray Fred is what they referred to the gray as. And someone asked me when I did the interview, like, how did you actually keep a straight face? And to me, I was like, well, it's not my experience. You know what I mean? It's their word. I'm just taking for face value what they're sharing, their firsthand experience on this situation. Now, for me, someone who I try not to like dive into people's stuff, watch too much TV, because I want to be able to just ask normal questions that maybe someone would like to, ask. I try not to go down the realms of a lot of this stuff, but like a lot of the stuff that I definitely know Whitley, but there's a lot of the stuff that I tried to avoid. But now what's interesting to me is his story true, or did he read something else and they were trying to profit off of that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, it was just an interesting story. And there was a part where I actually had to tell them, like, okay, that's a little too graphic. I don't know that the average consumer wants to, like the average listener wants to hear at the water cooler, about your abduction, that you were married to, that you guys were you had a relationship together. Interesting to me. But he said that his daughter was also abducted, things of that nature. So we've had him on a couple times. To share a story, and that he was here, and that he'll eventually go back to being a gray, I guess, is what he shared with us. I couldn't tell you what. I was trying to understand his purpose on why he was here on this planet, and what his purpose on, having conversations of what was the purpose of him being on Earth? Why did he go from being an alien, a gray alien, to be here on this planet? So They really didn't. He didn't really. We didn't get that out of the 2 interviews that we got. So it's interesting to me and this is something that's also in your book. You talk um, about abductions, UFOs and abductions. So as I talked about, this individual who had been abducted. Um, how common is it? I mean, because I don't know anybody that has been abducted, but what are we looking at here? I mean, are we going to see more abductions in the future? And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be facetious or like joke around, but like in the book you talk about it. Why is this happening?
Yeah, I think basically, I guess desensitization.
Uh-huh. That makes sense.
The idea, just hold on, let's try to get the A, B. There was Dr. John Mack, who's a Harvard psychiatrist who almost was kicked out of Harvard because of this. He started interviewing a couple hundred people who said they'd been through these abduction experiences and tried to see if, what was their psychosis, what was leading them astray, what was causing the problems in their lives. And he couldn't find that they were anything but normal people who had experiences. Now your friend who said he was a gray alien,
I wouldn't say he was my friend, but he was someone that we interviewed.
Well, not your friend, but I mean the person you interviewed.
Sure.
I would say, to me, I don't see that the gray aliens become humans and then go back. It's possible, as I said, remember, this is demonic influence or oppression, that possibly they were guided by these, supernatural beings and almost felt that their identity was one with them. Like in the Bible, when somebody was possessed, like the Garadene demoniac, when Jesus talked to them, he says, "What's your name?" And he says, "We're Legion." Well, the man wasn't Legion. The demons that were possessing him were Legion. So it's possible that, he was, how can I say, being controlled by these beings. I mean, it's interesting in the Spielberg film, Disclosure Day.
Yeah.
You see this woman who seems to have a separate identity, but at a certain point, her identity is being taken over by this being who's just guiding her. And she even says that she is a passenger, that literally, so it's possible that this person, was so identified with this alien who was guiding him for years. And then the alien says, well, I'm going to leave and go back to where I was. There's a lot about this whole thing I don't understand. But the one thing I want to leave with your viewers is this: is very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. You're dealing with fallen demonic beings whose goal is to kill, steal, and destroy. That is what they want to do. And they don't care if you get in their way. They will just use you and abuse you. Now, they may give you benefits initially, just like a lot of people in the occult. People who get into the occult, it's the same realm. You talk about the paranormal. I personally believe that the entire paranormal supernatural realm is all related. And it's interesting to me that even in Ancient Aliens, the TV series,
sure,
they are starting to say it's all related. And I believe it is. It's all related to this domain of darkness. It's just in different aspects of it. And they are there to try to get you, again, it gets back to this war, this invisible war, to get you away from God. And it's very dangerous because it can destroy you. As soon as you invite other spirits into your life, you are going to be affected by them. And there's a thing, people in the abduction thing, they will say to you, once you've been abducted or once you've been possessed or oppressed or whatever the word is, you can't make it stop. Except for one thing, and this kind of gives it away. There's one thing that can make it stop, and that is if you call on Jesus' name. And you're going, why would that make it stop? Unless it's somehow related to this invisible war.
Yeah.
That most people don't know. When they look, they say Jesus was resurrected from the dead. But a lot more happened than that. It says that after he was resurrected, he was raised up and seated with God the Father in the heavenly places, far above all rule, all authority, all power, and every name that's named, not only in this age, but the age to come. In other words, he's head over everything. So they have to obey. And if they don't obey, they're going in the abyss. I mean, basically, so that should tell you who these beings are, that you don't want to mess with them. I have 2 chapters in the several, I think it's 3 chapters in the book about spiritual warfare. I didn't plan to write a book on spiritual warfare. I just wanted to write about UFOs, but I found that I had to talk about that. What do you do if somebody says, hey, there's a UFO outside? Do you go outside and look at it? And my suggestion is that you don't. First of all, 99 times out of 100, it's not a real UFO. It's something else. It's what is it, like swamp gas, planets, flocks of birds, balloons, blimps, aircraft, hoaxes. I mean, so it's 99 times out of 100, it's a natural thing. So you're not really missing anything. And if the 1% of the time it isn't, the one thing people will tell you when they see a UFO, there's flashing lights along the edge of the UFO. Well, I don't believe these guys do that just for entertainment. You know that for epileptics, that strobe lights can send off into fits. Perhaps they have figured out a way to use flashing lights to bring people into a semi-hypnotic mode. And I just, and it's fine. You find people who stopped, gotten out of their cars, and just watched these things. All of a sudden, they have gaps of time in their memory. It's like it's gone. Or like you said, the person you put under hypnosis, and all of a sudden they start remembering things that they'd lost time. And there was a guy who basically said that if you've studied hypnosis, you understand people who've been under hypnosis have lost time in their memory. So I don't know, maybe that's not what's happening, but I got to say, don't even take the chance. These are the best con men in the universe, and they will trick you. And the other thing is,
before we go, as you were talking about, the cheat code is if you feel like you've been abducted, you got to call for Jesus Christ. You got to use Jesus Christ's name, call for him, and this will make this thing stop. For those who may have had encounters.
Yes.
And something also that I wanted to bring up, because you talked about the occult, and the first thing that came to my mind was like, they always talk about everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid, or, you talk about David Koresh and some of these Hitler. Do you feel like those were also people that may have these individual may have had encounters with these? Maybe they thought they were having an encounter with Jesus Christ because they were preaching the word. But I mean, I don't know. It's so interesting that people would follow into these. Do you call them cults or these religious? You know what I mean? These groups are just, I don't know. It throws me off a little bit, because you go to church and you just don't see a lot of that going on. And I'm just like,
well, I mean, the Bible talks about that even Satan himself can disguise himself as an angel of light.
That's
and
right.
So I would not be surprised that people who are quote unquote religious are also susceptible to fall for this, that they have seen what they think is an appearance of either Jesus or some angelic being, and that they're doing the right thing, although inside they should know that something's not quite right. Let me give you an example. One of the guys, the producers on our film, was involved in an exorcism, and he talked to a person who was possessed, and it was a process that went on for a while. But in the process, this spirit reached out to my friend and said, we can make you famous. He was a writer, and he wasn't famous at that point. We can make you famous. We can give you a lot of money. I mean, he's not making this up. I mean, this is an offer that was made to him if you only follow us. And it didn't say you had to give up his Christianity. It didn't say you had to. So, it's like their prime thing is if they can get somebody who claims to be a Christian on their side, oh my gosh, I mean, that's like a big hit for them. So I mean, I hesitate. I mean, you look at, I don't want to make a lot of enemies here, but you look at Joseph Smith, whether he did or not, he said it was an angelic being who came to him, who gave him the Book of Mormon.
Sure.
In Islam, they say Islam was Muhammad was approached by the angel Gabriel, who gave him. They say, because the thing they'll say is, look, could an old camel driver have written the Quran? And it's possible that some superior being did dictate a lot to them, but it certainly wasn't, from what we understand, the angel that was following God.
I mean, that could be
Because
the spiritual warfare as you were talking about
yeah,
earlier.
yeah. So I don't want to offend all the people who
No,
are
no, no,
Islamic,
no, for
but
sure.
on the other hand, I'm saying, you need to be careful. The Bible says test the spirits, even the spirits who say they're from Jesus or from other things, because if they deny the gospel, God the Father is one God, there's one God, Jesus is his son, Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and you cannot work for salvation. It's a gift. It's only a gift, and you have to follow Jesus. No angel can say those things. No angel. If the Bible says that the angels believe there is one God, but they
As,
tremble, and they
as we,
don't teach that.
yeah. As we get close to wrapping things up here, we got a few minutes left. But in your last chapter, you talk about what I mean. This has got to be like, as I said earlier, the reason why this show exists. Probably not the only reason, but end times, the year 2000, things of that nature. Where does
Sure.
prophecy, AI, where's that heading us? Is AI going to end us? Are we getting close to? And I'm not saying that you're predicting end times, but are we heading down a path with that with AI?
Well, you hear the word oracle. Oracle is when you basically you go to somebody who has all the answers. It used to be Einstein.
Right.
It used to be somebody who's the most knowledgeable person. Well, the most knowledgeable person is going to be AI. And the point is, AI is programmed. I mean, people say it's not. At this point, it's not so much. It's just gathering all this information.
Sure.
But if everybody starts to trust AI for everything, anybody who disagrees with AI is going to be out. I mean, look at what happened during COVID. You have Fauci up there. I am science, and if you take the vaccine, you won't get the
A lot of people did.
COVID, and you won't be able to pass it on. He
Yeah.
was the oracle at that time,
Sure.
and the point was, and people who disagreed with him lost their medical license, were thrown out of hospitals. People were ostracized. People lost political campaigns.
Sure.
I think that I'm not trying to deal with the Fauci thing right now, but just to give you an idea, when something reaches the level of being an oracle in society as the final answer, I think when AI gets to that point, no one's going to be allowed to disagree with it. And people who will are going to be completely ostracized. And so, yeah, I think there's a real danger there. And the fact that, I think you need to understand that these, as I said, these angelic beings are the most intelligent in all the universe. They certainly know how to manipulate computers to get the outcome that they want. And so, yeah, I think there is probably, I mean, I'm speculating here. I don't know for sure, but obviously the goal is to force people to only accept one source of information,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
and
you're
when
funneling
that
truth.
happens,
Yeah.
and when that happens, oh my gosh, Katie bar the door.
I mean, it has been a treat and honor to have you hang out with us for the last hour. If you are listening to us on one of our radio affiliates, KOSW, KAPY, our flagship station here in Seattle, KVI, you're going to want to go listen to the entire podcast by going to my website, onairmario.com, or go to your favorite podcasting platform and search U.S. Phenomenon with Mario Magana. Our guest tonight, Derek Warfell, the author of the book UFO and God, also has a documentary that you can also see. Where can they see this documentary?
Yes, it's just going to be online. It's not going to be in theaters.
Okay.
Just go to UFOsandGod.com. It has all the information there. It's coming out September 11th. The book is coming out in 2 weeks. UFOsandGodBook.com. And you can go there and you can order from Barnes & Noble, and it's on pre-order right now. So, yeah,
Perfect.
enjoy
Well,
it.
We'll have all the links posted in the podcast if you didn't get a chance to write that down. So all the information will be available. And we thank you so much, Derek, for taking the time to hang out with us this evening. What an honor and what a treat. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. For our entire team, Sophia Magana and myself, Mario Magana, be sure to look up to the sky because you never know what you might see. Good night.